Welcome back to History They Buried, where the past is never truly dead, just hidden. Each day we uncover the forgotten, the hidden, and the unspoken truths buried beneath everyday lives. What you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a warning. This is the dark history of the Blackthorne family, a once proud family with roots deep in the rural countryside of Yorkshire, England, whose story was swallowed by darkness and silence. Sitting on the edge of a remote Yorkshire village, the Blackthorne homestead stood as a grim reminder of centuries past. Built in the early 1700s, the manor was once a symbol of wealth and power. Its stone walls, worn by time and storms, were surrounded by twisted oak trees that whispered ancient secrets in the cold wind. Mary Blackthorne was barely 19 when shadows began to creep through the halls of her family home. Her delicate, pale face showed the seriousness of someone who had seen far too much for her years. Beside her, Thomas, her 15-year-old brother, held a worn, leather-bound book, a family treasure passed down through generations, rumored to contain mysterious writings about their bloodline. The Blackthornes had long been a family filled with tradition and whispered legends. Local villagers told tales of old family curses, forbidden deals, and the tragic deaths of those who dared cross the Blackthorne name. Despite their wealth and status, the family was isolated, not just by distance, but by an unspoken fear that hung like a shadow. By the late 1800s, the Blackthorne estate had already earned a reputation as a place where light barely reached, and where the past was never truly at rest. The curse that haunted them was said to have begun centuries before, when dark rituals and blood oaths were performed to protect the family's legacy, rituals that instead unleashed an endless darkness. Mary and Thomas grew up with the weight of this history pressing down on them. It was in the creaking of the floorboards at night, the cold breath of wind against the windows, and the hushed voices behind closed doors that they first sensed something was terribly wrong, something that would soon change the fate of the Blackthorne family forever. Before we continue with the story and its unspeakable secrets, I want to ask you something important. This channel is not for everyone, only the bravest souls who dare to face the darkest chapters of history. If you've made it this far, you are not like most people. You understand some truths are too horrifying to ignore, no matter how much they disturb us. So hit that subscribe button and join our community of true mystery seekers. And tell me in the comments, what part of England or the UK are you listening from? Are you brave enough to hear a story like this from your own backyard? The Blackthorne family's story was never openly told, only whispered in hushed tones by villagers who dared not anger the lingering shadows. The estate sat at the edge of a small Yorkshire village, surrounded by dense woods where sunlight rarely broke through the heavy trees. Life there seemed frozen in time, held down by the weight of history and a silence that hung in the air like fog. The family's story stretched back centuries, their name woven into local folklore as both respected and feared. Through the 1700s and 1800s, the Blackthornes were landowners, keepers of the land, and participants in old customs that bordered on the mysterious. Ancient texts hinted at secret rituals performed under moonlight, ceremonies meant to protect their bloodline but which many believed unleashed something far darker. For Mary and Thomas, growing up in the creaking manor was a constant battle between the normal and the unexplainable. On the surface they were children of privilege, but beneath lay a story of growing fear. Neighbors often avoided the estate, and when they did cross paths with the family, their eyes held a mixture of pity and fear. Whispers of a curse had existed for generations. It was said to have begun when a desperate ancestor, seeking to ensure the family's power, made a forbidden deal, one that bound their bloodline to a force beyond human understanding. Since then, misfortune followed the Blackthornes like a shadow. Early deaths, disappearances, and madness plagued their family line, but no one dared speak openly. Mary's mother was the last to speak of the curse, her voice shaking with fear and sorrow. She warned Mary that some secrets were best left untouched, that the past had claws sharp enough to tear apart those who dared dig too deep. But Mary, with her youthful curiosity and determination, kept searching, looking through old diaries, letters, and mysterious writings hidden in the attic. The villagers, meanwhile, grew quieter, their eyes avoiding the manor as the years passed. They recalled strange happenings, lanterns flickering in the woods where no one should be, howling at night, and shadows moving where no living thing should roam. For Thomas, the younger sibling, the manor's dark history was a puzzle he could not understand but felt deeply. He watched Mary study dusty books by candlelight, seeing her strength as a light against the growing darkness. Yet even her determination seemed fragile when the winds howled and the floorboards creaked as if the house itself were alive. This silence that wrapped around the Blackthorne family was not just absence of sound. It was a suffocating emptiness filled with fear, suspicion, and the knowledge that some things could never be spoken aloud without inviting ruin. Mary's diary was more than just pages of ink and paper. It was a fragile lifeline to reality in a world increasingly swallowed by darkness. Hidden beneath loose floorboards in the manor's attic, the diary was a collection of whispered fears, mysterious notes, and broken memories. An intimate record of the breakdown that gripped the Blackthorne family. She wrote by candlelight, her delicate hand shaking with every word. The entry spoke of nights filled with restless shadows, voices that seemed to come from the very walls, and footsteps echoing in empty hallways. What began as a vague sense of unease slowly turned into terror she could no longer hold back. One entry described a chilling night when Thomas vanished from his bed, only to be found hours later wandering the woods with no memory of where he had been. Another spoke of distant figures glimpsed beyond the fog, figures with hollow eyes that watched the house from the edge of the forest. Mary detailed the weight of isolation pressing down on them, not only from the outside world but from within their own family. Fear crept in and trust broke down as unexplainable incidents grew worse. Candles snuffed out unexpectedly, mysterious symbols scrawled in hidden corners, and the suffocating sense of being watched grew unbearable. Her words revealed a desperate desire for answers and a growing fear that the curse was not just a legend but a living, breathing force consuming her family. The diary became a testament to her strength and a warning for anyone who dared to uncover the blackthorn truth. As Mary's entries grew darker, the line between reality and nightmare blurred. She wrote of dreams filled with cold hands reaching from the earth, of voices whispering secrets in forgotten languages, and of an approaching doom she could neither escape nor fully understand. The diary ended suddenly, leaving a chilling silence, like a final breath held and never released. What became of Mary after those last pages remained a haunting mystery, one that would echo through time and silence those who sought the truth. As the blackthorn curse tightened its grip, Mary and Thomas found themselves haunted not just by whispers, but by disturbing sights and sounds that defied explanation. The manor seemed alive with a sinister presence, one that watched their every move from the depths of shadowed corners and beyond cracked windows. It began subtly. Flickers of movement at the edge of vision, glimpses of figures draped in darkness just beyond the threshold of the woods. Unseen eyes that followed them silently, lingering at the edges. The siblings would catch fleeting reflections in mirrors, faces that were not their own, hollow-eyed and sad. At night, the silence was broken by creaking floorboards, distant footsteps pacing the corridors, and the soft rustling of fabric where no one should be. Mary's heart raced with every unexplained sound, the heavy atmosphere turning the once familiar house into a prison of dread. One chilling evening, Thomas awoke to the sensation of cold fingers touching his skin, though no one was there. His whispered cries brought Mary rushing to his side, only to find the room empty but for the heavy, unnatural chill that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. The village folk spoke in hushed tones of a darkness that lingered beyond the trees. The eyes in the darkness, they called them. Some claimed these were restless spirits. Others believed them to be signs of the curse itself, feeding on fear and despair. Mary's journal captured her growing fear. She described feeling watched not just in the house but in the fields surrounding their home, where shadows moved against the moonlight as if alive. Sleep became rare. Nightmares filled with haunting faces and silent screams destroyed her peace. The siblings clung to each other, the only anchor in a world that seemed to fall apart with every passing day. Yet even their bond was tested by fear, their whispers sometimes turning to blame, their glances filled with suspicion. The once grand manor, with its faded tapestries and broken chandeliers, echoed with a restless energy. Windows rattled in the wind and cold drafts carried the faint scent of earth and decay, as if the house itself mourned the curse that had claimed it. Despite the growing terror, Mary's resolve hardened. She vowed to uncover the truth behind the eyes, to break the silence that had swallowed her family whole. But the deeper she looked, the more difficult the answers became, hidden in darkness and lies. As the shadows thickened around the Blackthorn estate, the local villagers grew desperate. Fear had taken root so deeply that rational explanations gave way to superstition and ancient customs aimed at containing the darkness. Their solution was chilling, chaining the family coffins. For generations, the Blackthorn family had buried their dead beneath the crumbling churchyard beside the manor. But after a series of unexplainable disappearances and rumors of restless spirits, the villagers took a drastic step. Heavy iron chains and locks were fastened around the wooden lids of each coffin, binding the dead in place. A grim warning and desperate measure to prevent the curse from spreading beyond the grave. Mary remembered the bitter winter evening when the village elders came to the manor with their grim offer. The air was thick with frost, and the sky was a bleak grey as they spoke in hushed tones about the broken promises the Blackthorns had made to forces they did not understand. The elders believed these chains could hold back the evil that lurked beneath the earth, but their eyes betrayed the dread that no physical barrier could truly imprison what had been unleashed. Inside the manor, the atmosphere was suffocating. The heavy scent of damp wood and decay hung in the air, mingling with a crushing weight that seemed to come from the very walls. Mary and Thomas often found themselves wandering the hallways at night, the clink of the chains on the coffins echoing through their minds like a dark lullaby. The chained coffins became symbols of despair, a visible sign of the family's decline. Friends and relatives no longer visited, and the Blackthorn name was spoken only in whispers and fearful glances. The curse was no longer just a story. It had become a real presence, binding the living and the dead in a cycle of misery. The disappearance of Eliza Blackthorn shattered the fragile calm that remained around the estate. Eliza, the eldest daughter of the family and once a symbol of hope, vanished one cold autumn evening without a trace. Her sudden absence sent waves of fear through the village, confirming that the curse was no mere superstition. It was real and deadly. Eliza had been a spirited woman in her late 20s, known for her kindness and beauty, often seen walking the village paths in quiet thought. Her sudden disappearance left questions unanswered and opened doors to darker possibilities. On that night, neighbors reported hearing strange sounds. Low whispers carried on the wind, the flutter of fabric in the trees, and an eerie chill that settled over the village. Search parties searched the surrounding woods and fields, but no sign of Eliza was ever found. Her room in the manor remained untouched, her belongings left as if she might return at any moment. The family's already fragile hold on hope began to fall apart. Rumors spread. Some claimed Eliza had been taken by restless spirits. Others whispered of a shadowy figure glimpsed near the edge of the woods. The more the villagers speculated, the deeper the fear grew. Mary recorded her pain in her diary, her words raw and desperate. She spoke of sleepless nights spent wandering the halls calling Eliza's name, of the weight of grief pressing down on her young shoulders. Thomas, too, felt the loss deeply, his once bright eyes now dimmed by sorrow and fear. The manor seemed to mourn alongside them. Doors slammed without wind, lights flickered in empty rooms, and the air grew colder still. It was as if Eliza's spirit lingered, trapped between worlds, caught in the web of the family's curse. Eliza's vanishing became a turning point, a symbol of the curse's unstoppable spread and the thin line between the living and the dead. Her absence was a silent scream echoing through the halls, a reminder that no one was safe from the darkness that had claimed the Blackthorn family. Armed with chilling knowledge from her discoveries, Mary embarked on a dangerous journey to find a way to break the curse that had bound her family for centuries. Her desperation grew with each passing day as she realized that ignoring the darkness would only allow it to consume them all. Mary searched every corner of the Black Manor and village archives, seeking clues hidden in forgotten diaries, mysterious symbols, and whispered tales from the oldest villagers. Each discovery was both hopeful and revealing of the depth of the darkness she faced. Local legend spoke of a forbidden text known only as the Book of Shadows, said to contain the secrets necessary to undo the ancient deal. But the book was lost to time, rumored to be hidden deep within the ruins of an old chapel in the heart of the Yorkshire moors, a place avoided by all for its haunted reputation. Determined, Mary planned her journey despite warnings. The moors were dangerous, with sudden fogs, wild terrain, and tales of spirits guarding sacred grounds. But Mary's determination was unshakable. She knew the fate of the Blackthorn family depended on her courage. Thomas insisted on coming with her, his youthful spirit a fragile light amid the surrounding shadows. Together they set out under a bleak sky, leaving behind the decaying manor and the whispers of the cursed woods. Their trek through the moors was filled with an oppressive silence, broken only by the crunch of their footsteps over frost-hardened earth. The landscape was stark, twisted heather, rocky outcrops, and skeletal trees outlined against the dull light. As they approached the chapel ruins, a chill wind carried a faint mournful song, a lament that seemed to echo from centuries past. The chapel stood in ruins, its stone walls crumbling and wrapped with thorny vines. Inside, the air was thick with dust and sorrow. Mary's fingers trembled as she searched through the rubble, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. Finally, beneath a collapsed altar, she found a weathered leather-bound book, its cover cracked but its pages intact. The Book of Shadows was real. Mary's hands trembled as she carefully opened the Book of Shadows, its brittle pages crackling beneath her fingertips. The ancient text was filled with faded ink, mysterious symbols, and detailed instructions for rituals, both protective and dangerous. Here lay the knowledge of the curse's origin and perhaps its undoing. The book described the exact nature of the deal made centuries ago, a binding of the Blackthorn bloodline to an entity existing between worlds, neither living nor dead, a force hungry for souls and bound by ancient law. This entity was both protector and jailer, giving power at the cost of endless suffering. Within the pages were warnings written in the margins by past family members who had tried and failed to break the curse. The rituals required great sacrifice and courage, demanding that the seeker face their darkest fears and defy the shadows that clung like a second skin. Mary read of cleansing ceremonies, chants to sever the blood bond, and the need for a rare herb, the nightshade bloom, which grew only in the deepest parts of the cursed forest. Failure to perform the rituals correctly could bring ruin not just upon the person performing them but upon the entire family. Despite the danger, Mary's determination only grew stronger. The book was both a map and a warning, revealing the path she must follow if she hoped to free her family. With Thomas by her side, Mary began planning the rituals, gathering what few supplies she could find, and preparing herself mentally and physically for the trials to come. The weight of history pressed down on her, but beneath it, a flicker of hope kindled. The Book of Shadows had opened a door, but whether it led to freedom or destruction remained uncertain. With the Book of Shadows guiding their way, Mary and Thomas prepared to venture deep into the cursed forest in search of the nightshade bloom, the rare herb said to hold the key to breaking the ancient deal. The forest was no longer just a place of whispered legends. It was a living maze of shadows and danger. As they stepped beneath the dense trees, the familiar world faded away. The thick branches blocked out sunlight, leaving only patches of grey light to guide their path. The air was damp and heavy, filled with the scent of moss and rotting leaves, mixed with something fuller, something almost alive. Every rustle in the undergrowth and distant snap of twigs set their nerves on edge. Strange shapes moved just beyond the corner of their eyes, vanishing when they turned to look. Whispers seemed to rise from the earth itself, unclear voices murmuring warnings or curses. The deeper they went, the more the forest seemed to resist, as though it recognized their mission and sought to protect its secrets. The ground grew uneven and tangled with roots that threatened to trip them, while thorny bushes clawed at their clothes and skin, Hours passed, and exhaustion began to set in. But then, just as hope seemed to fade, Mary spotted the telltale dark, glossy leaves and delicate purple blossoms of the nightshade bloom, a flower both beautiful and deadly. Harvesting it carefully, Mary felt a mixture of triumph and dread. The forest's heavy presence did not ease. If anything, it grew heavier. The shadows seemed to close in around them, and the whispers turned to urgent cries, urging them to flee. On their way back, the forest's resistance grew stronger. A sudden, unnatural fog wrapped around the path, confusing them. Phantom footsteps echoed around them, and unseen eyes glowed faintly through the mist. It was as if the forest itself sought to punish them for daring to take what it guarded. Mary gripped Thomas's hand tightly, determination burning bright despite the fear. Their quest was no longer just about survival. It was a battle for the soul of their family. Emerging from the forest's grasp, they returned to the manor with the nightshade bloom in hand, a symbol of hope and a reminder of the danger still to come. Back in the shadowed walls of the Blackthorn Manor, Mary prepared for the ritual described in the Book of Shadows. The air was thick with anticipation and fear, a real tension that wrapped around the family's fading legacy like a shroud. The ritual demanded blood and fire, a cleansing of the ancient bonds that tied the Blackthorn family to the curse. Mary had carefully followed the instructions: a circle of salt and herbs to protect against evil forces, candles flickering low, and the nightshade bloom placed at the center as an offering. With trembling hands, Mary drew a small knife. Her finger was pricked, and a single drop of blood fell onto the petals. The scent of burning herbs filled the room as she lit the ceremonial fire, the flames casting long, flickering shadows that danced across the peeling wallpaper and cracked wooden beams. Mary's voice rose in chant, ancient words that felt foreign yet strangely familiar on her tongue. The flame's glow lit up her determined face, eyes reflecting both fear and resolve. But as the ritual progressed, the atmosphere grew heavy, crushing. A cold wind swept through the room despite closed windows, snuffing out candles and causing the flames to sputter. Shadows stretched and twisted along the walls, forming shapes that whispered promises and threats. Mary's heart pounded as unseen forces tested her will, seeking to break her concentration and draw her into the darkness. The room seemed alive with struggle between hope and despair, light and shadow. At one point, a sudden gust almost extinguished the fire and Mary faltered, but Thomas's steady hand on her shoulder renewed her courage. Together, they pushed through the terror, completing the ritual's final words. A sudden silence followed, thick and suffocating, broken only by the faint crackle of the dying fire. For a moment, it seemed the curse might be weakened, the ancient bonds loosening their grip. But then came a low, guttural growl from the shadows, an ominous reminder that the darkness was far from defeated. The manor seemed to breathe again, alive with a hunger that would not be satisfied so easily. Mary knew this was only the beginning. The first ritual had opened the door, but it had also awakened the curse's true fury. Just as Mary and Thomas struggled to endure the curse's relentless assault, an unexpected visitor arrived at the Blackthorn Manor one bleak evening. Cloaked in a heavy dark coat, with eyes sharp and weary beyond their years, the stranger carried an air of urgency that sent a ripple of unease through the household. The visitor introduced herself as Eleanora Graves, a historian and occult scholar who had spent years researching the Blackthorn family's tragic past. Eleanora's arrival was no coincidence. She claimed to have uncovered critical knowledge about the ancient deal and a hidden weakness in the curse's design. Mary listened carefully as Eleanora spoke in a low, measured tone. She revealed that the curse was not simply a punishment but a complex binding ritual linked to a forgotten relic. The Blackthorn Sigil, an artifact lost to time but central to the family's fate. If the sigil could be found and destroyed, it might break the curse's hold once and for all. Over the next few days, Eleanora worked alongside Mary and Thomas, studying the ancient texts and family records. Her knowledge of mysterious languages and rituals proved invaluable, helping to decode puzzling messages that had confused the family for generations. Guided by Eleanora's knowledge, Mary and Thomas plunged into a desperate search for the Blackthorn Sigil, the mysterious artifact that held the key to ending their family's curse. Eleanora led them through forgotten corridors and dusty archives, piecing together clues from scattered pages of ancient diaries and coded messages left by desperate ancestors. Their hunt took them to the manor's hidden corners, a sealed chamber beneath the library, a crypt long untouched, and even the overgrown family cemetery where stones bore names blurred by time. Every discovery was shadowed by a heavy feeling, as if the house itself resisted their search. One evening, Eleanora uncovered a mysterious passage in the Book of Shadows referencing a blood-bound chamber, a secret room tied to the family's most ancient rituals. The key to unlocking it lay in a medallion hidden somewhere within the manor, worn by the first Blackthorn who made the deal. After hours of searching, Mary found an old wooden box hidden beneath a tattered blanket in the dusty attic. Inside lay a rusted medallion engraved with symbols matching those in the Book of Shadows. With the medallion in hand, Mary, Eleanora, and Thomas made their way to the hidden blood-bound chamber, sealed for centuries and whispered about only in the darkest family legends. A concealed door behind a tattered tapestry stood before them. Mary inserted the medallion into a carved indentation, and with a low, grinding noise, the heavy door creaked open. In the center of the chamber lay a stone altar, carved with mysterious markings. The Blackthorn sigil rested atop the altar, a dark metallic emblem pulsing faintly with a sinister light. As they examined the sigil, a sudden coldness swept through the chamber. Shadows shifted and grew, forming into a dark shape that filled the room with dread. The curse was awakening, desperate to protect its hold on the Blackthorn bloodline. Mary felt a surge of terror but pushed forward. The moment had come to fight for her family's freedom. She raised a dagger, forged long ago and passed down as a protective charm, and struck the sigil with all her strength. The chamber erupted in a storm of shadow and sound. A roar filled the air as the dark presence screamed in fury, the walls shaking as unseen forces battled for control. But then, silence. The sigil shattered into fragments, its light extinguished. The crushing weight lifted, and for the first time in generations, the manor seemed to breathe free. Mary, Eleanora, and Thomas stood shaken but victorious, knowing the curse had been broken. Those scars would remain, both in the manor and their souls. The breaking of the Blackthorn sigil sent a shockwave through the manor, rippling beyond stone walls and into the very land surrounding the estate. For the first time in centuries, the heavy veil of darkness began to lift, but the scars it left were deep and not easily erased. Mary, Eleanora, and Thomas felt the immediate relief of the curse's hold loosening. The suffocating weight that had pressed on their souls eased, and the oppressive shadows that had haunted every corner began to retreat. Yet the air still held a fragile tension, a reminder that the battle was won, but the war against the trauma would be long and difficult. The villagers, once fearful and distant, cautiously approached the estate. Whispers turned to tentative hope as news spread that the Blackthorn curse might finally be broken. Some came bearing gifts. Others sought forgiveness or reconciliation, acknowledging the burden the family had carried. Within the manor, healing began, but it was uneven. Mary's mother, though freed from the curse's immediate grasp, struggled to reclaim her sanity after years of torment. The once vibrant family was broken, each member carrying wounds that would take time to heal. Eleanora stayed on, offering her expertise and compassion, guiding Mary and Thomas as they worked to restore the estate and their lives. She reminded them that freedom was not just about breaking curses, but about rebuilding trust, love, and hope. The manor itself seemed to respond, light filtering through dusty windows, the once creaking floors growing steadier. Yet some rooms remained cold and silent, reminders of the darkness that had once ruled. Mary's journal became a testament to strength. She recorded not only the horrors but also moments of courage, love, and small victories against the lingering shadows. The Blackthorn family's story was far from over. The curse's legacy would always be a part of them, but it no longer defined their future. As the sun rose over the Yorkshire moors, the promise of a new beginning glimmered faintly, a fragile light breaking through the remnants of darkness. The Blackthorn curse did not end with the breaking of the sigil. It had seeped into the very soul of the nearby village, weaving itself into the folklore whispered by generations. The estate's shadow lingered over the countryside, a chilling reminder of the darkness that once ruled. Mary found herself drawn into the villagers' stories, attending gatherings and listening to the hushed whispers that drifted through the night. Old-timers spoke cautiously of unexplained events, strange lights flickering near the woods, soft cries carried by the wind, and sudden chills that no one could explain. Mary was determined to face these echoes head-on. She began recording the village's tales, collecting first-hand accounts from those brave enough to speak. Her goal was not to stoke fear, but to understand how the curse's legacy had shaped their lives, and to offer assurance that the past need not define their future. The local children, once warned to stay away from the manor's grounds, now listened with fascination as Mary recounted the family's story with honesty and compassion. The fear that had once filled the village slowly gave way to curiosity and eventually a shared sense of history. Even the village elders, who had long regarded the Blackthorn name with suspicion, began to soften. They saw in Mary and Thomas a determination and strength that echoed through the family's dark history, proof that light could break through even the deepest shadows. Mary continued to work alongside Eleanora's teachings, fostering dialogue and understanding between the family and the village. Together they organized annual commemorations, quiet gatherings to remember the past and celebrate the strength of those who had endured. These ceremonies became a bridge, weaving together the threads of history, memory, and hope. As the village embraced its past rather than feared it, the Blackthorn legacy transformed from a tale of curse and despair to one of unity and strength. With the first light of dawn spilling over the Yorkshire moors, the Blackthorn manor stood bathed in a soft glow, a stark contrast to the darkness that had gripped it for centuries. Mary, Thomas, and Eleanora stood together on the threshold, the air around them lighter, yet heavy with the weight of everything they had endured. The curse that had once defined their lives was finally broken, but its echoes would linger in the bones of the land and the hearts of the people. They had faced ancient darkness, a malevolent force bound to their bloodline and their home, and emerged not as victims but as survivors and guardians of a fragile peace. Mary looked out over the estate, seeing not just a place scarred by history, but a symbol of resilience and hope. The long road of healing stretched ahead for her family, the village, and the land they shared. The villagers, once wary and distant, had come to embrace the Blackthorns once more. Together, they celebrated their shared history, honoring those lost to the curse and those brave enough to fight it. Eleanora's presence had been a beacon, her knowledge and courage lighting the darkest corners of the manor and their hearts. Though she eventually departed, her legacy remained, a testament to the power of wisdom, compassion, and unyielding determination. As Mary closed the final page of her journal, she felt the story was far from over. History is never truly dead. It is buried, waiting for those brave enough to uncover it. The Blackthorn tale was a warning, a lesson, and a testament to the enduring human spirit. In the quiet moments, Mary understood that darkness would always exist, but so would the light. It was their choice, their fight, and their legacy to ensure that light prevailed. The manor doors closed softly behind them, but the story of the Blackthorn family would echo through time forever, a reminder that even the deepest shadows can be brought to light. Thank you for joining this journey into the hidden past. Remember, the truth lies beneath the surface, waiting for the brave to uncover it. Until next time, stay curious and stay courageous.